my discussion. What does 18:14 say? It's a famous verse, a noble verse. 14 verse of chapter 18. What does it say? Is there anything what? Yes, that is the most important verse in this chapter, because this is what the angel is going to tell them. Is there anything? Because there's going to be laughter at the fact that God makes this promise to Abram and Sarai. So, huh? Yes, they beyond childbearing age, both Abraham and Sarah. So that's almost an impossible situation, because a old man can impregnate a young woman. That's not impossible. That happens all the time. That's not impossible. But it can come a point where a woman becomes too old. And so this was almost an impossible situation on both sides for God to fulfill this promise. So I really want to talk about this because, see, the danger of trying to help God out, so many of us have created situations we have to live with the consequences of those situations, and those situations become unbearable because we tried to help God out. And in this situation, this is a really different and twisted story. And you're going to see how complicated and convoluted this story gets, because when you really look at the detail of the characters in the text, the tension in the text, because story is about Sarai, Abram, and Hagar. Hagar is an innocent victim. And really in this story, Sarai is going to try to blame Hagar, because she's going to say she looking at me funny. She's going to try to, in a sense, blame Abram, but she's going to project her anger toward Ishmael. And she created all of this by trying to help God out. That's dangerous. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to share with you in this text is this. You can help God out and make things happen. That's fine, go ahead and do it. But there's a price to pay. And God is not going to remove the consequences that comes with you doing it your way. Without him, not according to his will and his way. See, this is one of the things the Bible teaches overall as a principle. God wants us to align our will with his will. We have free will. God has a plan and a purpose and a design for our lives. And so what we're supposed to do is align our lives, our purpose, with his will, and get under his will and let his will make things happen and direct us and lead us. We want to do things our own way. See, that's a problem. That's a problem. That is always a problem. That's always a problem. But see, God is on his own timeline. God is never early, he's never late, he's always on time. God has a better vantage point of vision about your situation and your circumstances than you do. See, the problem is you looking in it and at it, but God can see the big picture, the whole entire picture. Because there's a whole lot of things that have to take place in order for God to do what it is he's going to do, or it is designed for some things to take place, then God's going to do what he's going to do. Because God will test your patience. Oh, you don't want to hear that. God will test your patience. Because what you got to realize is God always keeps his promise. His promise might be delayed, but it's never denied. If he makes a promise, he's going to keep that promise. And he doesn't want you to be involved in trying to make happen what he has promised he was going to make happen. That's what happened in our lesson. Now, I'm telling you, Sarah had She did not have the best intentions. She became frustrated. She looked at her own situation and her circumstances to determine what God was going to do. You cannot look at your circumstances to determine what God can do or what God's going to do. Because chapter 18 of Genesis, verse 14 says, is there anything too hard for God or impossible for God? There is absolutely nothing too hard or impossible for God. It might be impossible for you to make it happen. Now, I don't think none of y'all are going to get pregnant at the age y'all at. But nothing is beyond the realm of possibility. Nothing. I saw the other week a woman 60 years old. She's so mad at her little cougar baby, got her pregnant, and she fussing and raising all kind of cane. It's nonsense crazy. Nothing is beyond the realm of possibility. Think about things that happen in our world that humans do that we once thought were impossible. It's absolutely amazing. But this is the issue that I was reading. She doubted that God could do this thing through supernatural means because that's the only way this could come to pass. Because she was old and Abram was old. But God says, I'm going to do this. And if God says, I'm going to do it, you know it's going to be through supernatural and divine means. See, you can't rely on human means or on natural means or on things that can be explained. If you can explain it, let me give it to you one time, one more again. If you can explain it, it's not a miracle. Now, I want you to get this. Now, I had to teach this at the other church when I taught the 32 miracles that Jesus performed in the New Testament. In the Gospels, he performed 32 miracles. None of those miracles could you explain. Miracles cannot be explained by logic or reason. If it can, it's not a miracle. I explained to you, if you say to me, money came in the mail, and that was a miracle, and God sent it, I would say to you, that's not a miracle. That's a coincidence. Because you just explained to me how you got money. Now, it didn't come from nowhere. It had to come from somewhere. You get what I'm saying? That's not a miracle. Now, in the charismatic church today, they make a whole lot of things miracles that are not a miracle. If it's a miracle, you cannot explain it. You cannot explain how Jesus turned water into wine. You cannot explain how Jesus fed 5,000 with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. You cannot explain how the woman with the issue of blood touched the hem of his garment and became whole. You cannot explain a miracle. If you can explain it, it's not a miracle. It goes beyond human reason and human logic. And this was absolutely a miracle. Do you believe in miracles today? Do you believe that God still performs miracles? Honestly, do you believe that? That God can supernaturally perform miracles in the lives of individuals based on their faith. Now, I'm with Ralph West. The problem we have is that faith healers make people think that it's them that's healing and the source of power is through them. No. The New Testament says Jesus healed people because of their faith or the faith of those who solicited him on the behalf of somebody else. But it is faith that heals you, your faith. And then you have to couple that with the will of God to perform that miracle based on your faith. And sometimes it is his will, and sometimes it is not his will. But this miracle is specifically going to be performed because of supernatural intervention. God's going to do it. Now look, here in this particular text, man, I'm telling you, this fella decided in chapter 16 to take his wife's advice, to do something. Now listen, ain't no man in here going to turn this off or down. She was Egyptian and she was probably black. Yes, right. Well, yeah. And I'm telling you, and there ain't nobody ain't gonna turn her down. And so she says, she laughs. It doesn't happen immediately. See, that's the other problem. If it doesn't happen immediately, it doesn't mean that it's not gonna happen. God's not on our time schedule. You got to wait to see how it's going to unfold, because when God makes the promise to Abram, a lot of other stuff happens. They go to Egypt, and uh, Abram prays for the city of Sodom and has to rescue Lot. All that happens, and then it's not around till chapter 19 that she actually conceives and becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son and names him Isaac. That's a long time before God actually manifests the promise, the divine promise. And so in this particular text, I just want to kind of go just a little bit, and it talks about in chapter 16 how the three men came to Abraham's tent and under a tree, and one of the angels, we believe the angel of the Lord, spoke to Abram and told him what God was going to do and all that kind of stuff. In verse 10, it says, the angel of the Lord said to her, because Sarah was in the tent, overheard the angel said it, and she laughed and really didn't believe that this was going to be possible, because it seemed almost impossible for God to do such a thing.
Were they on their way to Sodom? The three men, were they?
No, these are angels that came to Abraham's tent to tell him what God was going to do, to explain to him God's promise that he and Sarai was going to conceive a son. And when she heard this, she laughed. So that was their assignment. These are not the three angels that showed up in Sodom. These are the three angels that came to Abraham, and you see that in chapter 16. They came and they told him, two angels, and one of them was the angel of the Lord. That's the important part you need to see. That was the angel of.
Like it was three, and then one stayed back with Abraham.
Right.
And the other two went on. They didn't go to Sodom.
Well, it's a possibility that they did. That could be the same two angels that showed up at Lot's house. But the angel of the Lord, he stayed there with Abram and gave him the message. Now, it could be the timeline, it could be just as consistent that those, and it's like probable that those are the two angels that showed up at Lot's house that got the men's attention. Now, you got to understand, these angels were men, and they were tall, formidable, had perfect physical physique, and the Sodom and Gomorrah had become so corrupt. That was a city full of men who didn't like women. I wouldn't want to go visit there.
So Sodom was all men?
No, it's plenty of women there, but they didn't like women. They had become sodomites. They had become so depraved that sure there were women there. In order for there to be men, there had to be women, because only women can have babies to produce men. But the men had become so depraved and so unnatural in their affection and desires that they only wanted to have sex with other men. They had become that depraved. Because if you look at the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot offered his 14-year-old daughter to them since she was a virgin. Take her and do whatever you want to do with her since you want to have sex. But they didn't want her. They wanted to have sex with the two angels who were men. They had become that depraved that they had lost the natural appetite and desire for women. And that's why God destroyed them, because they had become so depraved that they could not even hear Abraham's plea for them to change, to repent, to leave those evil ways. Abraham preached. I mean, man, he preached a revival and gave God a number. And by the time he got through preaching and having that tent revival, he didn't have one convert. Not one person came to the altar. Not one person who was righteous in the whole city. But Lot. But Lot. And the angel came there to rescue him and his family. And I'm telling you, it could have been those two angels. It's probable that those two angels went on to Sodom, because the city had become so corrupt that it was beyond any spiritual revival, because Abraham had a revival there. He pled for the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, but it was so corrupt that it had no desire for repentance or to get to that place. Y'all with me? So let me get to this one here. Good question. Good. I wish I had time. I'd come back to it. This 18, verse 18. Let me get to verse 19 because I really want to kind of, when Abram got the commandment, and then the Lord finally, man, my computer is not doing right. 19, and let me see here. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot and his daughters. So many people are fascinated with that. I really can't explain to you about Lot and his two daughters in the cave and thought all the men in the world had been destroyed. Their thinking was so small, they thought that all the men in the world had been destroyed because Sodom had been destroyed by fire. And they thought all the men, and so they thought that they had no chance of having children. And so they got their father drunk and became impregnated by them. Which that civilization of people, Sodomites, I'm finna spark a controversy, and Robert believed that those people were a part of the Canaanites. These people were Canaanites because the Canaanites were known for Sodom, to be Sodomites. Huh? No, they're descendants that were the offspring of Lot's two daughters and him, kind of sprung a civilization of people who were sexually deviant. Canaanites who were considered Sodomites. So let me go to chapter 19 because y'all gonna make all my time go up. Now, this is important that God answers the promise in chapter 21. Y'all with me? God answers the prayer, and God then allows Sarah to get pregnant, but she tried to help him out early by offering her handmaiden Hagar to Abraham. And Abraham did not. Do you think he should have turned her down? I said, no, babe, I can't do that. I can't sleep with that girl. I can't sleep with her. Well, I can't be messing, man, I can't do that. Look at Mike back there. Could you turn her down, Mike? I said, no, I can't. No, I ain't gonna sleep with her. But it caused so many problems. Now, I really wanted to go back to this. Let me see if I can find it. Because this is why some people believe. I'm gonna find it, and I know I don't have a lot of time because we've been talking a lot. So I want to kind of give you that God spoke to Hagar and Ishmael on the backside of the desert and promised, for I will make unto him a great nation. Now, this is why many people believe that the Arab people are so successful. I'm in verse 17 of chapter 21, and we're gonna see that God is speaking and promises to,
So my question is,
in Bible study. Huh?
why was it simply because he was made out of wedlock? Because it seems like they were punished for something that they really had no control over.
Who punished them? Sarah did, but God wouldn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Sarah punished them, but God didn't, because we're going to read this where God protected Hagar and Ishmael, starts in verse 8. And we're going to see where God is not going to inflict punishment upon them. They were innocent victims
Yes.
in Sarai's plan to help God out. God didn't punish them. Sarai did by putting them out of her and Abraham's house. And so they were innocent victims because she didn't have a choice but to do what her mistress said do.
Yeah.
She had no choice.
But see, when I was reading, it seemed like they both got the same thing.
Who?
Like Ishmael and Isaac. Like both of them would be.
No, couldn't one of them get the land?
But both of them had many descendants. I guess.
Yes, but one of them have been chosen by God to be God's chosen people. Now, I knew Rob was going to look up right there. One of them has been chosen to be God's, and see, and that's a question that has to be answered. And it doesn't mean that they're special. And see, that's not a right word to use. It's not a good word to use. It is chosen, and it's only to be chosen to carry out the message of God. Not that they are special, but they've been chosen to be God's messengers. Not that they are better than any other ethnic group of people. That's where we have diluted the concept that the Jews are special or better than any other ethnic group of people. God loves all people. And the Jews are not special, but they've been chosen to be God's messengers in the Old Testament, like the church has been chosen to be God's witnesses in the New Testament. And see, we use the word special, but they're not special in that they have a higher level of privilege with God than other people or other ethnic groups of people. That's a misconception because that's not true. Because we're going to see here, God also is going to bless the descendants of Ishmael. Go ahead.
Well, there were 12 tribes of Israel,
Uh-huh.
and everybody talks about that. They don't talk about the 12 tribes of Ishmael.
Right?
They're,
Yeah.
they're equal, but
Equal in what way? Equal in that they both had the same
because
father.
they're both descendants
One-
of Abraham. God told him,
Descendants, but only one is the son of promise.
but God told Abraham he'd make him the father of great nations. That's why they're at odds.
So both of them are great.
Yeah.
No, not in the sense that in greatness, in that both of them are the father of many people, but only one, because see, remember the promise is the land of Israel. The land of Canaan is what it's called in scripture. And he promised that particular land, that particular plot of land to Abraham's descendant. But he says you're going to be the father of many and many people in many nations. And so I'm going to use you to be my messengers to carry my message. And Ishmael is not used in that way. It does not mean that, because in this we're going to see God is going to protect Hagar and Ishmael because they are innocent victims, and God is not going to punish or penalize them because they got drugged into this mess that they did not choose to be a part of.
What is their blessing?
Their blessing is that they're blessed, they're prosperous, and they're blessed. The descendants of Ishmael are still blessed today. They're the Arab people. Some historians believe that the Arabs who are in the oil-rich nations, not only there in the Middle East, but in Egypt and Northern Africa. Now, listen, Africa is probably as oil-rich and resource-rich as any other nations on the earth. And so there are black Jews. The only nation on the continent of Africa that has never been colonized, can anybody guess what it is? It's the nation of Ethiopia. They have never been defeated and colonized by a Western power. The Europeans could never colonize or conquer Ethiopia. And many scholars believe that the first Christian church was the Ethiopian church. Before the gospel went to Europe through Cornelius and Peter preached to him, it went to Africa. How do we know that? I didn't get to that part in the book of Acts where Philip witnessed to the Ethiopian eunuch. And when he witnessed to him and told him what the book of Isaiah says, that eunuch went back to Ethiopia and started the first Christian church. The oldest Christian church in the world is the Ethiopian church, and it is one of the only countries in Africa that has never been colonized by a Western power. Every other country has been ripped and robbed of their natural resources except Ethiopia. Ethiopia has been a country that has been under, some believe, if you want to believe, divine protection. So what I'm saying to you is he has been a blessing. God has blessed the descendants of Ishmael as well as the descendants of Isaac, which is the son of promise, who God legitimately said, your descendants shall occupy the land of Israel. That's the conflict. That's the conflict. That's why they don't like Israel, because Israel is surrounded by its enemies, and they are fighting over land. May the 17th, 1946, I think, if I'm not, that date might be off, is when Israel became a nation. 1948. May the 17th, 1948. It's when they became a nation again. But before then, and people say the Palestinians never controlled Israel. It was the Ottoman Empire. It was controlled by Islamic people. No, ain't no such thing as a Palestinian. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. They are Arabs. They live in the land of Palestine, and they are considered Palestinians, but not by ethnic lineage, but by region. They are called Palestinians, but those Palestinians are Arab by ethnicity and lineage. So that's what they're fighting over. Who controls? You remember the Dome of the Rock I showed to you? The land of Israel, the temple, that's what they're fighting over. Now that seems ludicrous to us, that they are fighting over land and all of them got land. Everybody got land in the Middle East, and everybody who has land in the Middle East is resource rich. Every nation in the Middle East got oil, got their own oil, natural gas, all these resources. Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, all of these countries that surround Israel got their land, got resources, got oil, natural gas, and other resources, but yet they say that ain't enough. We want Israel. We want to control this plot of land. Go ahead.
They're fighting over that land right now because the wrong people are there.
No, well, yeah, but that's, some would dispute that the wrong people. Now, who would be the right people?
The true Hebrews.
Who would they be?
Who would they be?
Yeah, who would they be? They would have to be direct descendants of the 12 sons
Of Israel.
Yeah, Jacob.
That
Jacob.
right.
They had to be the direct descendants of Jacob.
Those
Abraham,
people-
they would have to be direct descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
And those people in Israel right now who occupy that land, who control that land, are Ashkenazi Jews. They are converts.
Okay, but you got to say, if you say Ashkenazi Jews, you can't use the word Jewish and at the same time deny that they're not Jewish, legitimate Jews.
There's a difference between
Well, I'm just saying, but you can't even use the word Jew. But you can't use the word Jewish though, because if they're not Jewish, you can't say. You just got to say they're Ashkenazi. You can't say that they're Jewish, because so there are different branches of Judaism. There are different. See, this is one of the disputes, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, because let me explain this to you. There are Jews from every ethnic group. There are white Jews. There are Jews from Africa, Jews from Russia, Jews from all over the world. Jews are like the people of Cuba. They come in all shades of color. And so you look in Africa, not all Africans are black and as far as pigmentation and melanin. And so to Jews are not all fair-skinned or some of them are black Africans. We know that there are Ethiopians who are Ethiopian Jews. There are white Jewish people. There are all kinds of Jews. There are different sects within Judaism that you really have to see. There are Jews that only believe in the first 4 books of the Bible. Those are not the Jews that are occupying Israel. They are a minority in Israel. They are a minority because you have a strict sect of Judaism where they are so stuck to the law. Because, and then you have to distinguish between this. And I know y'all got me a little bit off the lesson. I'm fine with it because we got a couple minutes. But let me explain this to you. This is important to understand. There's a difference between the state of Israel and the people of Israel. The state of Israel is corrupt, period. And it is not in the will of God, and they are not necessarily aligned with God's purpose and God's plan and God's will. But the people of Israel, which is the Jewish nation that he chose, not special, not better than any other ethnic group of people. And so you have to distinguish between the nation of Israel led by Benjamin Netanyahu and the people of Israel, which is the Jewish nation, which comprised of all kinds of different ethnic diverse groups of people, because when they became a nation May the 17th, 1948, Jews came from every nation all over the world. They had been dispersed and scattered all over the world. And they finally, and when they won that 3-day war, 7-day war, and they came back to Israel from all those different countries. And so when you look at Israel, what we see on television is only one shade of Jews who are in political power. But there are all kinds of Jews in Israel that make up the Jewish nation of every shade and color. But the ones who have the political power look like Benjamin Netanyahu, but there are some that look like us that live in Israel. Because they have certain sections and areas in Israel where that ethnic group of people, ethnic group of Jews, where they congregate, just like we have Chinatown or Harlem. But they don't have any political power. They don't have any political power, but they are there in the city of Israel. You get what I'm saying? So they have all kinds of power. So you got to distinguish between the nation of Israel and the Israeli people, who are the Jewish people, who are of all background, races, and ethnic group of people. And see, when the Jewish nation has been vilified because of the state of Israel led by Netanyahu, who might have committed genocide in Palestine and may not have acted in a ethical way, and people condemn the Jewish nation. But when you condemn the Jewish nation, you condemn all the people of Israel, and they are not guilty. They're not guilty. Because there's a difference between the nation of Israel and the people of Israel. It's just like there is a difference between what you want to call the Palestinian people, who are innocent victims, and Hamas. Hamas does not represent the average Palestinian who lives in the West Bank. There's a difference. And among those, what we would call Palestinians, I would say Arab, are different, diverse groups of people of all shades and colors. There are some Arabs who are black as I am, who are the descendants of Ishmael. There are some Jews as black as I am that are the descendants of Isaac. And so you really got to know how to look at this anti-Semitic culture in which we live in, and people vilify, because if you say that the Jews are black, then are of a darker melanin than us, then people hate us as much as they hate the Jewish, because it's the Jewish people that they hate. So even if we got control, they would still hate us because we are Jewish. They would hate us.
We would be original Hebrews. We are Hebraic.
Okay, let me give you this, and I'm gonna move forward.
Let me say one thing.
Go ahead.
Before you go ahead.
Okay.
When the Jews came and went back to Israel in 1948, they came back because of a Balfour Declaration. They were given that land. Those Jews who are in Israel Russia and Ukraine and Turkey up from that area. Those are the ones who are in Israel. The people, is that the way you said it? The ones that are in power.
They came from Western Europe because they were ran out during the Eastern Europe, Western, in that area, not necessarily. And they came back there for the purpose of, that was in the Balfour Declaration did give them the right to go back and settle. It's not the first time it happened, because you have in the book of Nehemiah where the king gives them permission to go back to their homeland. It's not something that's new and something that is unheard of. Yeah, because the Palestinians never occupied and had control of the land. It's always been in Jewish hands, other than the Ottoman Empire when the Arabs through the Muslims controlled it. Because there's always a battle. Israel has been controlled by two groups historically: the Arabs and the Israeli, the Jewish nation in modern time. But back then, God allowed them to be led into captivity, and like the Babylonians came and destroyed it, the Syrians came and destroyed it and controlled the city. In Jesus' time, the Romans came in and occupied Israel. But those Jews were there. They've always been there. In all times, in all civilization, in every time period in history, the Jews have always occupied Israel. And they were all ethnic groups. See, because the argument is, and I know I've debated black Israelites on air, on podcast, the only way you can legitimately say that you are Jewish, you have to go back to the records of 1st and 2nd Chronicles. If you cannot trace your lineage, the Jews keep meticulous records of their lineage. They can go back and they can keep records, and they've always kept records. They're one of the oldest civilizations that have kept records from their beginning, and they list the descendants, and some of the Jews today that are alive and some are in Ethiopia can trace their descendants back to 1st and 2nd Chronicle and say that they are legitimately a Jew, one of the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, and those 12 sons were slaves in Egypt. Now they intermarried. You got to realize that they intermarried in Egypt. Egypt is in northern Africa. Now, if you're in northern Africa, in Egypt, you're going to see some sisters and you're going to marry. And you're going to produce an offspring. And some of those people in Egypt went down and colonized some of the area in Africa. So yes, some of those descendants of Jacob were African American, but Jews are of every color. To argue that the only people that are Jewish are the people that you see representing national Israel is a misconception.
I got a question that's totally off of that.
Okay.
I was as I was listening, because I did the King James version and the New International version.
Okay.
So tell me if my understanding is right. From what I understood, Abraham and Sarah were given this promise.
Yes.
And in between that time, Abraham worked and preached to save Sodom.
Yeah.
And it was until after that
Yeah.
that Sarah became pregnant.
Yes.
So in other words, even though he had a promise from God that hadn't come to full fruition, he was still working for God.
Right. You made a good point that I really wanted to make, but we got off a little bit, but that's all right. I'm gonna finish next week because I got some point, because that was one of the points that I was gonna make. Just because you don't get the promise when you want it, you can't help God out. But while you wait, you got to work, because God still has work for you to do, and you have to work while you wait on the promises of God. And the problem is, you become impatient when you don't have nothing to do. The problem with Sarah, she didn't have nothing to do. Abraham was content, because he was continuously doing God's work, because one time he had to go rescue Lot.
Yeah, so Abraham was a
Well, no, not a minister,
What was he?
just a man.
Just a man.
The father of a great nation. He was not a prophet, not a king. He was just a very successful man who accumulated wealth. He accumulated wealth, and Abraham was the man who learned how to domesticate and domesticate animals, farming. He knew how to take these two animals and crossbreed them and come up with a hybrid. He just became very successful.
So when you say that he did the tent revival for Sodom, was he just a messenger? Like
Just a messenger.
Okay.
Because see, he was going there to prove to God that he could preach and that somebody was righteous in that city, and that he got down to about 5. He couldn't find one. But he went there not necessarily as a preacher or a prophet, but just to go there to show God that there was somebody that was still righteous in that city. He was not, the Bible doesn't call him a prophet nor a priest.
So that really wasn't what he just did that because God had told him he was going to destroy the city.
Yeah, because he pleaded with God. God had made up his mind what he was going to do. Abraham tried to get him to change his mind and not destroy because he was a man of compassion.
So it seemed like to me that in that after God made the promise to him, and like I never got that he believed in God, but I never got that what am I trying to get? I never got that he trusted God. Like I never got like, why didn't he say, no, I believe God. God has told us, has made this promise to us, and God is not a man that he should lie.
Because of his flesh. Strictly because of his flesh. It wasn't about not trusting God. The text never indicates that Abraham didn't believe that God was going to fulfill his promise.
Exactly.
But given an opportunity to indulge in what he was offered, ain't nobody turning that down now. Come on now. Well, I don't care if she told him or not. But he didn't do it because he didn't believe that God wasn't going to fulfill his promise. He did it because of his carnality, his flesh. It doesn't say nowhere that Abraham, in the process of saying, he didn't say to her, look, now I ain't going to do this because I still believe in God. Or, listen, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do this because I believe this is how God, it never does that. These are all Sarah's actions.
But don't you think it's strange that, because I kept thinking, it seems that he had a lot of actual conversations with God.
He did.
Yet he still did make the wrong choice.
Because of the flesh. Because we tried to, and really, Sarah had a strong influence. She was the power broker in this dynamic. She had a lot of power. She exercised power over Hagar and power over Abraham. Abraham didn't have to do what she said, but he did because what she was offering. Hagar didn't have a choice. So she was willing a lot of power. And then she had the power to get rid of Ishmael, and Hagar said they got to leave this house today. And then Abraham punked out and said, he punked out because he could have said, no, she ain't leaving. You created this mess and we're going to all live in it and we're going to work it out. We're going to work it out. But he said, do with her whatever you want. She's yours. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He literally punked out and said, whatever, she your maid, do whatever you want with her. He literally did not stand up for, Hagar.
And I just saw this strange because it just seemed like he was so close with God, and he was, it just seemed like, he's actually, when he goes to save Sodom, it's like he's actually talking with God. He's saying, well, God, if you can find 50. Then he said, well, if you can find 45. And he kept going down, but he was actually debating with God. So
he never doubted what God could do. The text never indicates, the narrative never said he doubted that God was going to fulfill his promise. He didn't know when and how.
He
He did believe God. He knew God would destroy the whole city.
But
He didn't want
had
God
enough
to.
knowledge that, look, lady, the Lord done promised me a son, and you gonna have a son.
No, his flesh. I'm gonna tell you how it probably happened. If you let the cinematic presentation of how things happen today, she probably dropped her robe. I'm gonna go ahead but 9 minutes. She probably dropped her robe and said, "Now look, you can go have that. Look at that. Go and sleep with her, and she can have your baby because she fertile." She probably was between the ages of 23 and 29, maybe younger than that. Sarah was almost 80 to 100. And so it was strictly because his flesh. Listen, sometimes the spirit is willing, but the flesh is. I don't care how close you are to God, how much faith you have in God. I was teaching this last night. Yield not to temptation, for yielding is sin. And then in that prayer it says, lead us not into temptation. Temptation is the greatest thing you have to overcome when it comes to letting God do things in his time, in his way, according to his will. It's your flesh that gets in the way. Your flesh is the greatest thing the devil is not your greatest enemy. See, that's another misconception. The devil is not your greatest enemy. Your flesh is. Gladys, now you can't be hollering at that loud. Now listen, you shouldn't be hollering at that loud. Now you should be at the age now. Come on now. Your flesh shouldn't be giving you that much trouble. That's probably all in your head. But I'm saying your flesh is your biggest enemy. It gives you more and when I say your flesh, I'm not just talking about your physical body. I'm talking about your mind, your will, and your spirit. You battle against that every day. You know what I'm saying? And your emotion. Some people, their emotions, they give into their emotions, their feelings. You see what I'm saying? And so when I say your flesh, your carnality is your flesh, but your carnality, that's your greatest enemy. You got to overcome Abraham could not overcome that temptation. He could have said no. He knew that that's not what God told him. He said, I'm going to give you a son. It's going to be between you and Sarai. And Abram knew that the Hagar wasn't Sarai. You get what I'm saying?
So also, what are your points that even though they had did that, God still stayed with him?
Stay with who?
Abram.
Yeah, he still blessed Abram with a son. But then he tested Abram's love and loyalty by saying, the son that I gave you, the only son, take him up on Mount Moriah and offer him as a sacrifice. Again, testing his faith, his patience, not knowing how God is going to do it, but God's going to do this. And Abram again demonstrates the same faith he had in believing God was going to give him a son. He had the same faith that he would sacrifice his son. And many scholars believe Abram believed that God could resurrect Isaac even if he killed him. So he was willing to do it because he believed in the supernatural intervention of God. If God allowed him to sacrifice his son, that God had the same power to raise his son from the dead. Make sense to you? So his faith never wavered. The only time he became really not a man is when he was down in Egypt and he was scared of the Pharaoh. And